Welcome to the Does It Work podcast by Biomarker Labs, where you can find wellness without the woo.
There's an alligator coming down.
Thank you so much for speaking with me today. I really appreciate it. You are a University of Iowa biology professor,
Correct.
And you run a monthly discussion on genetic testing, right?
For the community, yeah. As part of that, I work with a group of students here at the university where we meet weekly, so what we call the Personal Genome Learning Center. And so these are students that voluntarily work in this group, and part of what those students do is support some of the programming for a monthly meeting we do in the community at the local public library, the DNA Interest Group, Iowa City, where we meet each month.
Oh, that's awesome. What got you interested in genetic testing?
I'm a geneticist, and so I've watched that market develop as an educator, and as most of my colleagues have been and are. I was somewhat skeptical of it, but then there was an opportunity that arose here at the university to offer a first-year seminar, and those first-year seminars are designed to get students in their first semester involved in something that's interesting and fun, but subject-oriented. And so I took that opportunity to develop this first-year seminar on doing a 23andMe test and sort of going through the results over the semester. As an entree to genetics, using their own genomes as a platform for learning. And so with doing that, in planning to do that course, I sort of investigated the market to see which platforms may be most appropriate for a college-age student that would entertain them for a semester. And so I did my investigation of, the different options available, ended up on 23andMe that I used for that class.
So you said you used to be a skeptic. What changed?
Still, I wouldn't. I was interested in it. I guess I was a skeptic initially because of the marketing in terms of the 23andMe specifically about health. And I sort of used to joke as a lecturer that, and this was back when 23andMe was expensive, that if you paid me $1,000, I could tell you that you could exercise more, eat less, quit smoking, and live longer without doing a genetic test. And so once I've been more involved in the platforms, I now see some utility that's available in those platforms.
Okay. And I'm really curious about who comes to the community-based monthly events.
A variety of people, because I try to keep it so that the subjects that we cover sort of engage the broad spectrum of folks that are interested in direct-to-consumer testing. And so that's a case where you have people interested in genealogy, you have people interested in the health reporting, you have people that are just interested in the ancestry composition and sort of which test is best to do. And so I try to keep the subject of the meeting so it sort of covers this broad range of things. And therefore, we have some people that come every time, but depending on the topic, whether it's health related or genealogy related, we may bring in sort of a different subset of folks to those meetings.
And what are some of the more popular topics that you guys have covered recently?
So, our last 2 months have been quite successful. Tuesday night, we had our November meeting and we showed a film. And so this was a documentary film called Thank You for Coming, and it was about a woman's search for her sperm donor father. And so that was fun, and that drew quite a few people in. Last month, we had more of a workshop on using ancestry DNA. So sort of going through, and the title of it was Getting More from Your Ancestry DNA Results. And so we focused on some of those aspects of the ancestry DNA report that are oftentimes overlooked by the casual user, and sort of what the utilities are that's buried in that platform.
Yeah, I'm curious about what the utilities are of Ancestry. Like, I don't know if you saw the woman tweeting about her dad finding out that their family is not Italian from an Ancestry test and yelling in an exaggerated Italian accent about it. Yeah, I don't know. I just see people kind of like freaking out. Why do it? What's the benefit?
Well, most people are doing it because of that prediction of where their ancestors are from. And I actually had not seen that Twitter, but I was talking to a student in our weekly meeting last night, and she was telling me about that Twitter feed on that she had followed. And that's not uncommon, that someone takes a test and finds out that their ancestry is not consistent with what they expect it to be. And there's a variety of different reasons for that. One is that, there may be an adoption or something like that in your past that you're unaware of, and so your ancestry may not be as the oral story says it should be. It could be a case that your sort of expectations of your ancestry are different from what's actually being estimated, because depending on which company you're looking at, they're sort of estimating a deeper time frame to people's ancestry than most consumers are sort of expecting. Most people are thinking, oh yeah, I'm 25% Italian, 50% German, 25% English, or something like that. They're not going to give you that fine of granularity on the countries of origin of your migrant ancestors. It's much more deeper and broader than that in terms of, where you as a composition of genes sort of fit into geographical distribution of those genetic variants, and then parsing out sort of a percentage of your ancestry based on that. And the different companies sort of were shooting for different time frames, either more recent, deeper. So depending on which company you do, you're going to get likely a different result based on how they sort of targeted their test. But that ancestry composition is the thing that draws a lot of people into doing a test, especially on Ancestry, because that's what their marketing is somewhat geared to. But the greater utility of it is, to me, is the relative matching. And so there's 10 million plus people in the Ancestry database. They take your DNA, match it with those other 10 million plus folks, and identify individuals that you share a recent common ancestor with, and they predict that relationship with them. And then that set of cousins that you get in your DNA relatives then can be used to look at your family history in terms of your tree for your family. And if you're an Ancestry subscriber, the DNA tests are really tightly integrated in with the tree building platform of Ancestry.com. And that's really the Ancestry business model, is to bring people in and hopefully get them to become subscribers of their Ancestry.com family tree building service. And so most of what we focused on was the tree building part of it. We did have a bit in October about the new Ancestry composition estimate. And so just this fall, Ancestry redid how they actually compute your ancestry and make those predictions. And there was a pretty major change in how they had been doing it. And so we went through some of the details of how they changed their algorithms that have led to sort of different predictions than what people had prior to the fall.
Interesting. So I want to focus on the health aspect. I was listening to the Ben Greenfield podcast this morning, and I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's like kind of a biohacker kind of dude. And he was talking about how one thing that surprised me was there was a study on people who followed kind of just broad-based diet and exercise recommendations, and a group that's followed diet and exercise recommendations based on their genes, and the gene group saw higher or more benefit. And then he was really like breaking it down, saying your genes impact very, like, to me, like micro things. Like, for example, your genes can determine whether a high fat, low carbohydrate diet is better for you versus a high carbohydrate, low fat diet is better for you. Your genes can determine whether you do better with saturated or unsaturated fats. Even like whether you're able to digest or utilize vitamin D without, like, if you have a certain gene variant, taking vitamin D supplements is actually bad for you. I wanted to know from you whether the current genetic tests on the market can actually tell you those things about yourself, and whether it's actually like worth digging into for a normal individual.
Well, I mean, there are studies available that indicate genetic variants that influence sort of metabolism and things of that sort, which now there's a whole suite of different commercial testing that's developed related to fitness and diet. I actually haven't done any of those specific tests, and I've only sort of cursorily looked at sort of what they're actually testing and reporting. So I can't say much about the insides of those particular products and sort of how maybe useful or not they are. 23andMe does do some, well, they only really do a diet in terms of a predicted genetic weight and sort of what diet is likely to most influence your weight. And so saturated fats versus carbohydrates and things like that. And their model is fairly detailed and built on the 23andMe database in terms of research consented customers and some studies that they've done with them. I mean, personally, I would say they predict my weight right on, which is interesting. Some people I've had tell me that they're off on their weight. Either they predict that they should be lighter than they are, and they tend to not like that, and the other way as well. And then on my own personal report, it says that my weight is more strongly determined by my saturated fat intake, which I suspect to be true. And I participated in one little 23andMe experiment last fall, actually starting in January of this year, where they had a weight study. And what they did was get their customers to agree to 3 different diet or exercise protocols. And in that case, I was assigned a low-fat diet as my protocol. And so went on a 12-week diet where I reduced my saturated fat intake, and I lost 30 pounds. So they haven't actually came out with the results of that study yet. But I was glad that I actually got the saturated fat treatment, since I suspected that's what mostly influences my weight, and was able to lose 30 pounds doing that.
Well, that's
Since then, I
cool.
started eating meat again, and I've gained some of it back. But so I should go back on the vegetarian diet, and potentially would be better off.
So at the end of the study, the goal is to say that whether there is or isn't a correlation between their recommendations for diet and the success of the diet.
They would hope to essentially get from the 3 treatments, more information on unique genetic profiles that say respond to saturated fats or do not respond to saturated fats. And then they had a carbohydrate group as well. And so if you reduce carbohydrates, do you respond or you do not respond? And then they had a group where they had them increase their exercise to see if they respond or not. I'm a habitual exerciser, and I know that exercising has no influence on my weight except for making me more hungry, and therefore it sort of is detrimental to my weight. So.
And that's, as far as I can tell, a really common thing, actually, that it's very, very difficult the vast majority of our calories are burned just through maintaining our body temperature and like thinking. And so moving our bodies doesn't really make a huge difference either way, except to make us hungrier. But it has other beneficial effects. For example,
makes you feel entitled to eat.
Yeah. But it does increase our sleep duration and quality, which has a very direct impact on our weight. So kind of in a roundabout way. But yeah, so just from your own like research and, gut feeling, how confident are you in those genetic-based lifestyle recommendations right now?
Right now, I would say most of them are based on fairly limited studies and fairly limited genetic variants. And so, in many of the cases of these types of reports, they're going off of essentially one variant that's been associated with, say, a diet aspect or a fitness aspect. And then making a prediction on a fairly, what's would be expected to be a quite complex trait where many genetic variants are influencing that. And although that particular variant statistically is associated, it's going to have a fairly minor influence on the overall trait. And therefore, based on your genetics, you're going to be predicted to be one way or the other, but how much do other genetic variants that are not used to make the prediction, how much do those account for your unique trait at that condition?
Absolutely. Is there any reason that people should be wary about submitting their DNA, like privacy concerns or issues with insurance companies, or maybe making bad decisions based on some of this early research that turns out to be superseded by better information later?
Well, I think submitting your saliva sample to 23andMe and Ancestry are fairly, I would regard them as safe in terms of protected within those companies. And so as long as you're comfortable with that service and their terms of usage of that service, although those can change over time, then you should feel comfortable. They're going to ask you whether or not you want to participate in research, and so you should be comfortable knowing on whether or not you want to participate or not, and that you've toggled the right button that represents your desires. Because that's where the news articles come out as, 23andMe sold your data. Well, they sold research consented customers' data, and so you have to be that research consented customer. And so you should know what that entails. Where the privacy issues, I think, come in the most strongly is whenever people download their raw data from a service like 23andMe and start uploading it to other sites. And so that's where potential dangers can arise, and people may not be aware of the risk that they may be putting themselves into for some other nefarious purposes of people accessing that database and using your information for some purpose that you do not sort of want it to be used as. I think I would say that the big companies, Ancestry and 23andMe, are well protected with the way that they do things. Other databases are a little bit more suspect in how much they may be used for other purposes.
Where do you see over-the-counter genetic testing going in the next 5 years?
It's so unregulated that I think that there's going to continue to be an expansion of new options. And so I just noticed as I was preparing for a class this fall is So 23andMe does Alzheimer's prediction based on one major genetic variant that's known to increase risk of Alzheimer's. There's other genetic variants that have an effect on Alzheimer's susceptibility. And there's now a place where you can upload your 23andMe data to it, and they'll give you essentially this polygenic model. And so all the genetic data essentially that's understood to influence Alzheimer's risk, and they'll give you that risk score based on the totality of your genetic data for a small fee. Actually, the fee is about the same as doing a 23andMe test. And so all they're doing is analyzing the data that comes off 23andMe and giving you a risk score from that data. And I think that there's going to be sort of an expansion of those types of services. I think that the big companies will continue to mature and sort of compete for market space. I think that those sort of fly-by-night organizations will come and go in terms of, oh yeah, we can develop the service, we can market it out there and see if anyone takes advantage of that, and then eventually, if it doesn't succeed, it'll go away. So I think the genetic testing is going through sort of this .com boom of services appearing. Some of them will disappear. The 23andMe's and Ancestry's, MyHeritage's, Family Tree DNA, all of those are sort of have a solid business model. And I think that they're going to continue to persist and expand. And I think the services will just get better and better as they expand their customer databases.
Awesome. Wonderful. That sounds hopeful. Yeah. Do you have anything else that you think people should know about over-the-counter genetic testing?
Well, my biggest thing that I recommend, and part of why I started this monthly meeting, is that people need to understand before they purchase one of the kits is what they're going to learn from it and whether or not that's aligned with what they want to learn from it. And so I recommend people to do their homework and know what to expect in terms of the product and how that sort of aligns with their goals. What do they want to know? Because I'm constantly asked, which is the best test? And my response is, what do you want to know? Because there are differences. And if you take the test that doesn't support what you want to get, then you just basically wasted your money. So.
Absolutely. Very good advice. Well, thank you so much for speaking to me today, Bryant. It was really wonderful to meet you.
Yes. Nice talking to you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Where can people find out about your research or, join the discussion if they're in the...
So I keep a webpage. Easiest way to get there is genetics4, and so number 4 genealogy.info, and that has some information in terms of our monthly meetings in Iowa City. We also have a Facebook page, DNA Interest Group Iowa City, as well.
Awesome. Great. Well, have a good rest of the day.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Does It Work podcast by Biomarker Labs. For links, show notes, and more, check out biomarker.io/podcast.